The moving boxes were stacked in neat rows, each one labeled with care. Clothes, books, kitchenware, our entire life packed up and ready to go. I stood in the middle of our now empty apartment, hands on my hips, breathing in the scent of fresh paint and cardboard. Tomorrow was supposed to be the beginning of everything. Lisa and I had spent months planning this. A new city, a new home, a fresh start. I had left behind a steady job, sold the apartment we had lived in for years, and put everything in motion for the biggest change of our lives. She had been the one who wanted it the most. She talked about it constantly, about how excited she was for a new chapter. I believed her. God, I was an idiot. That night, Tom came over for one last drink before we hit the road in the morning. My best friend since college, he had been supportive through everything, helping us pack, offering advice, even throwing a little farewell gathering last week. But tonight, his energy was different. He kept swirling the whiskey in his glass, staring at me like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Finally, he sighed. "Henry, you sure Lisa's excited about this move?" I frowned. "What kind of question is that?" He hesitated. "I mean, have you noticed anything off with her lately?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Tom, she's been stressed, yeah? We both have. Moving across the country isn't exactly easy." He didn't laugh. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I saw her yesterday. She seemed distant. Like she wasn't all there." Something about his tone sent a flicker of unease through me, but I brushed it off. "She's just overwhelmed." Tom didn't push, but I could tell he wanted to. And maybe if I had listened, really listened, I would have realized that the doubt was already there, buried deep in the back of my mind. But instead I shrugged it off, poured us both another drink, and convinced myself that everything was fine. Because tomorrow, Lisa and I were starting fresh. Right. I woke up early the next morning, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. This was it, the final stretch. By this time tomorrow, Lisa and I would be waking up in a new city, ready to start our new life. She was still asleep, curled up on her side, her dark hair splayed across the pillow. I watched her for a moment, taking in the peaceful rise and fall of her breathing. She looked happy. Content. Tom's words from the night before echoed in my head. "Have you noticed anything off with her lately?" I shook it off. He was just being paranoid. Lisa and I had spent months planning this move together. We had talked about our future, dreamed about what life would be like once we settled in. There was no reason to doubt her. Still, something small, something nagging, lingered in the back of my mind. After making coffee, I went through our last-minute checklist. The movers had already taken most of our stuff, leaving just a few suitcases for the flight. Lisa's suitcase was next to mine by the door, neatly packed as always. That's when I saw it. A folded plane ticket, half tucked into the front pocket of her bag. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something about it felt off. Maybe it was the way she had stuffed it in there carelessly, like she hadn't meant for me to see it. I pulled it out. At first, nothing seemed strange. It was a ticket for today, same time as our flight. But then my eyes landed on the name. Elizabeth Johnson. One passenger. My chest tightened. I stared at the ticket, waiting for my brain to make sense of it. Where was my name? This had to be a mistake. Maybe the airline had printed separate tickets? But no, I knew how we booked it. Together. I checked my email, searching for our booking confirmation. When I found it, my blood ran cold. There was only one reservation. Hers. The room felt too quiet. Too still. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic outside. Lisa wasn't planning to leave with me. She was planning to leave alone. I clenched the ticket in my fist, my breath coming fast and shallow. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. This was a lie. And I had less than 12 hours to figure out the truth. I stood there, gripping the ticket so tightly that the edges curled in my palm. My mind raced through 100 explanations, each one flimsier than the last. Maybe she had booked this separately, and just forgot to mention it. Maybe there was some mix-up. Maybe. No. I wasn't stupid. Lisa and I had sat together, on this very couch, choosing our seats side by side. We had planned everything together. And yet here it was, a ticket for one. I felt like I was standing on a fault line, the ground cracking beneath my feet. I needed answers. I walked back to the bedroom, heart pounding in my chest. Lisa was still asleep, curled up like she didn't have a care in the world. How could she sleep so peacefully knowing what she had done? Knowing she was about to walk away from me forever? I knelt down beside her and shook her shoulder lightly. Lisa! She stirred, blinking up at me. For a moment she smiled, soft, warm, like she always did. Like she loved me. Then she saw my face. Her smile vanished. What's wrong? She asked, voice still thick with sleep. I held up the ticket. What is this? Her eyes flicked to it, and in that split second, before she forced her expression into something neutral, I saw it. Panic. She sat up slowly, tucking her hair behind her ear. It's my ticket, she said carefully. Why? Why is there only one? My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. Where's mine? Lisa let out a soft breath, as if trying to steady herself. I booked it separately. I was going to tell you. When? I demanded. When we got to the airport and they told me I had no reservation? Her lips pressed together. Henry, please. No, I snapped. No more please. No more excuses. Just tell me the truth, Lisa. Were you ever planning to come with me? Silence. That silence told me everything. I stood up, running a hand through my hair. Jesus Christ. I let out a sharp laugh, but it wasn't really a laugh at all. More like a broken sound clawing its way out of my throat. I sold everything. I quit my job. I gave up everything for us. And you were just going to leave? Lisa's hands trembled in her lap. Henry, I didn't. Didn't what? I barked. Didn't mean for me to find out? Didn't think I'd notice? She closed her eyes, inhaling shakily. And then, finally, she told me the truth. I was never coming with you, she whispered. The words slammed into me like a train. I took a step back. So what was this? Some elaborate way to dump me? You couldn't just say it to my face, so you made me think we were starting over. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I stared at her in disbelief. You didn't want to hurt me? Lisa, you built an entire lie around our future. You let me believe we were leaving together while you planned to disappear without a word. She flinched. I thought it would be easier this way. I scoffed. For who? Silence again. Then I asked the question I wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Is there someone else? Lisa's gaze dropped to her lap. That was all I needed to see. There was. Of course there was. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, my hands curling into fists at my sides. Who? My voice was hollow. She hesitated. Henry, it doesn't matter. Who? I roared. She flinched but didn't look away this time. She owed me that much, at least. Finally, she whispered his name. Mark. Mark. A single name, but it felt like a bullet to the chest. I had never heard of a Mark before. Not once. Whoever he was, he had already taken everything from me. Lisa had planned this for months, maybe longer. While I packed, she had been planning her escape. While I sold our apartment, she had been building a new life with another man. I had thought we were moving toward our future together. But Lisa had only been waiting for the right moment to leave me behind. And now, I had less than 12 hours to decide what to do about it. I don't remember how long I stood there after she said his name. Mark. It felt like the entire room had gone still, like time itself had folded in on me. I wanted to scream, but my voice was trapped somewhere deep in my chest. I wanted to grab something, anything, and smash it against the wall. I wanted to rewind time, back to yesterday, back to a week ago, back to before I knew. Instead, I just stood there. Mark who? My voice came out colder than I expected. Lisa swallowed hard, fingers twisting in the sheets. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter? I clenched my jaw so tight it ached. The hell it doesn't. Who is he? She hesitated, then sighed. Mark Davis. The name meant nothing to me. He wasn't a friend, wasn't a coworker, wasn't someone I had ever suspected. He was just a stranger. A man I had never met, but who had been in my wife's life long enough for her to throw away everything for him. Where did you meet him? I asked, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe I wanted to torture myself. Maybe I thought if I heard it, I could somehow understand. Lisa hesitated. Then, softly, 6 months ago. 6 months. I exhaled sharply. So while I was planning our move, while I was selling our apartment and quitting my job, you were already with him? Lisa closed her eyes, like she couldn't bear to look at me. I didn't mean for it to happen. I laughed. A hollow, bitter sound. You didn't mean to? Lisa, this isn't some accident. You built a whole damn lie around this. Around us. Tears filled her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. Not anymore. I shook my head. So what was the plan, huh? You just leave for the airport, and I show up with my bags like an idiot, wondering where the hell my wife went? Her face crumpled. I was going to leave a note. A note. That was all I was worth. I turned away from her, pressing my hands against the dresser to steady myself. My head was spinning. My whole life, our life, had already ended in her mind. I just hadn't gotten the memo. Does he know about me? I asked. Lisa hesitated. I turned back to her, eyes burning. Does he know you were going to leave me like this? That you were planning to disappear from my life without so much as a goodbye? She bit her lip, then nodded. He knows. I let out a slow breath. So he's fine with it? Lisa didn't answer right away. That told me enough. Mark knew. Mark didn't care. Who the hell was this man? Some guy she met by accident? Some old flame? Or had she been looking for a way out, and he just happened to be the one who opened the door? None of it made sense. I thought back to every night Lisa had come home late. Every time she said she was working extra hours. Every time I had kissed her goodnight, while he was still fresh in her mind. 6 months. 6 months of lying. 6 months of smiling in my face while planning a life without me. And now I had less than 12 hours before she walked away for good. Unless I did something about it. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, the weight of the truth pressing down on me like a cinder block strapped to my chest. Lisa stayed on the other side of the room, arms wrapped around herself, like she was the one who had something to fear. And maybe she did. Because I wasn't the same man who had woken up this morning, excited for the future. That man was dead. In his place was someone I barely recognized. Someone who had nothing left to lose. What now? I asked finally. My voice sounded foreign, flat, cold. Lisa hesitated. Henry, Don't, I cut in, standing up. Don't feed me more lies. I want the truth. All of it. Right now. Her breath hitched. I already told you. No. I turned to face her, eyes burning. You told me what you had to. What I forced out of you. But I want the real truth. The parts you were never planning to say. She looked away, biting her lip. Why, Lisa? I demanded. Why him? Why this? She shook her head. I don't know. Bullshit. Lisa flinched. You knew what you were doing, Lisa. You knew when you kissed me goodnight. When you looked me in the eyes and told me you loved me. You knew every time we talked about the move, every time I said I couldn't wait to start over. My voice cracked. And you just let me believe it. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I didn't know how to tell you. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. So you just didn't? Silence. I ran a hand through my hair. Did you ever love me? Lisa's eyes snapped up, wide and wounded. How can you even ask that? How can I not? I shot back. You're leaving me in the worst way possible, Lisa. How do I believe anything you say anymore? Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She had done this to me. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. Are you happy with him? She hesitated. Too long. That was my answer. I exhaled sharply. I have two choices then. Lisa blinked, confused. What? I can meet you at the airport, pretend none of this happened, and beg you to stay. My hands curled into fists. Or I can disappear before you do. Leave first. Walk away and never look back. Lisa's breath caught. I let the words hang between us. Then, finally, I asked the question I never thought I'd say. Or maybe I should tell Mark the truth about you. Lisa's eyes went wide. Henry. I stared at her, my mind already whirling. She had spent months lying to me. What if Mark didn't know the whole story? What if Lisa had been lying to him too? I had less than 12 hours. And for the first time, I wasn't the one being left behind. I had the power to decide how this ended. Lisa stared at me, her eyes wide with fear, not for me, but for herself. She knew what I was thinking. She knew that if I went to Mark, if I told him what kind of woman he had tied himself to, this entire fantasy she had built could collapse. Henry, please, she said softly. Let's not make this worse. I let out a bitter laugh. Worse? I took a step closer, watching her shrink back. Lisa, you spent months lying to me, planning to disappear without a word, and now you're worried about things getting worse? Her hands trembled at her sides. I didn't want it to be like this. Well, congratulations, I snapped. It's exactly like this. She swallowed hard. What are you going to do? I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know. I had three options. Confront her at the airport, demand an explanation, try to make her stay. But I already knew how that would go. Lisa wasn't staying. No matter what I said, no matter how much I begged, she had already left me in her mind. Leave before she does. Walk away, erase her from my life before she erased me from hers. Start over alone. Let her deal with the weight of her decisions. Expose her. The thought pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat. If Lisa had been capable of this, what else had she lied about? Did Mark even know she was planning to disappear on me like I was nothing? Or had she spun him a different story, one where she was the victim, and I was just some dead weight she needed to cut loose? I stepped past her, grabbed my keys. Where are you going? Lisa's voice was tight with panic. I didn't look at her when I answered. I'm going to talk to Mark. She gasped. Henry, no. I turned to her, staring her down. You made your choice, Lisa. Now I'm making mine. I walked out the door. I didn't look back. I drove without thinking, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The anger in my chest wasn't burning anymore, it had settled into something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to beg Lisa to stay. I wasn't going to let her leave without consequences. I was going to find Mark Davis. It didn't take long to track him down. Lisa had been careless, too confident that I'd never go looking. I found his address in her emails, buried in a conversation thread about future plans. Future plans that didn't include me. His house wasn't far, just a 20-minute drive across town. Suburban, clean-cut, expensive. The kind of place Lisa had always said she wanted to live in. The kind of life I thought we were building together. I pulled up across the street and killed the engine. For a few minutes, I just sat there, watching. A man stepped out onto the porch, stretching, checking his phone. Mid-40s, tall, fit, comfortable. He had the look of someone who had never had to fight for anything in his life. This was him. This was the man Lisa had chosen over me. I got out of the car, my heartbeat slow and steady. I walked across the street, up his driveway, until I was standing right in front of him. He looked up, confused. Can I help you? I let out a short breath. Yeah, I said. You can tell me what the hell you're doing with my wife. For a second, Mark didn't react. Just stared at me like he was trying to put the pieces together. Then his expression changed. His brows furrowed, his jaw tensed. You're Henry. So he knew about me. Of course he did. Yeah, I said. And you're Mark. The guy Lisa is throwing away 10 years of marriage for. Mark exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't want trouble. Oh, trust me. I cut in. Neither do I. But I think we have a problem. He sighed. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean for this to happen. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Yeah? Funny, that's exactly what Lisa said. Mark's expression darkened. I don't know what you want me to say. I want to know the truth. I stepped closer. Did she tell you we were moving together? That I quit my job, sold everything for a fresh start, only for her to use it as an excuse to leave me behind? Something flickered in his eyes, hesitation. I tilted my head. She didn't tell you that part, did she? Mark shifted uncomfortably. She told me, it was over between you two. That you were holding on to something that was already dead. I clenched my jaw. Of course. Lisa had rewritten our story to make herself look like the victim. She lied, I said coldly. She was going to walk away without a word. Leave me standing at the airport like an idiot, thinking we still had a future. Mark inhaled deeply, running a hand down his face. He was putting it together now. The cracks in Lisa's story. The reality of what she had done. You still think she won't do the same to you? I asked. Mark didn't answer. Because deep down, he already knew. Mark stood there, silent. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking past me, at something only he could see. Doubt. It had taken root in his mind, twisting around every lie Lisa had told him, choking out the fantasy she had built. I could see it happening in real time. Good. She didn't tell you the whole story, did she? I pressed. Mark exhaled sharply, shaking his head. She said you were distant. That you were just going through the motions, that the marriage was already over. I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Distant? I took a step closer. I sold my life for her. I left my job. I packed up everything we owned, thinking we were starting over. I pointed a finger at him. Meanwhile, you were her real plan. Mark shifted his weight, rubbing his temple like this conversation was giving him a headache. Like I was the problem. I gritted my teeth. Let me ask you something, Mark. If Lisa was willing to lie to me for 6 months, what makes you think she won't lie to you? That one hit. His jaw tensed, but he kept his face neutral. Lisa's not a bad person, he muttered, but the words sounded weak. Uncertain. I took another step forward, lowering my voice. Then why is she sneaking out of town? If she really wanted to be with you, why not just tell me the truth? Why not be honest? Mark didn't have an answer. I let the silence stretch between us before delivering the final blow. She was going to leave me with a note, Mark. I let that sink in. That's all I was worth to her. A few words scribbled on a piece of paper, left behind in an empty apartment. I tilted my head. How do you think she'll leave you? His nostrils flared. He hated this conversation. Hated that I was right. I watched him struggle with it, the need to defend Lisa, to protect the version of her he had fallen for. But it was crumbling. Lisa was never going to give him a clean, happy ending. Because Lisa wasn't clean. And if he didn't see it now, he never would. Mark finally exhaled, shaking his head. I need to talk to her. I smirked. Yeah. You do. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing on his perfect little porch, his perfect little life already falling apart. Lisa thought she was in control. Thought she had everything figured out. She had no idea what was coming. I drove home slowly, letting the weight of what I had just done settle over me. Lisa had spent months crafting her perfect escape. Every step, every lie, every detail, meticulously planned so that she could walk away without consequence. She had thought of everything. except me fighting back. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands had stopped shaking. My mind was clearer now. I wasn't lost in the fog of heartbreak anymore. I was past that. This wasn't about saving our marriage. This was about making her face what she had done. When I stepped inside, Lisa was standing in the living room, phone in hand. The moment she saw me, her expression tightened. "You went to him," she said. I didn't answer. I just shut the door behind me, watching her carefully. Lisa swallowed. "Henry, what did you say?" I let out a small, humorless chuckle. "I told him the truth." Her face paled. For the first time since this started, I saw fear in her eyes. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. I tilted my head. "Why?" "Because you were planning to leave me standing in an empty airport, Lisa. You were going to disappear like I never existed." She flinched. "I was trying to." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't feed me more bullshit about how this was supposed to hurt less." My voice sharpened. "You didn't care how much it hurt me. You just wanted a clean exit." Lisa's hands trembled. "And now what? What happens now?" I shrugged. "That depends on Mark." Her eyes widened. "What did you tell him?" "The truth," I repeated. "That you were lying to me. That you were lying to him. That you were never planning to be honest with either of us." Lisa let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her forehead. I could see the panic creeping in. She wasn't in control anymore. And she knew it. "You had no right," she whispered. I laughed, really laughed. "No right?" I stepped closer. "Lisa, I had every right. You wanted to leave me with nothing. No answers. No closure. Just a note. And you expect me to just, what? Let you get away with it?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not anymore. I stared her down. "Mark knows now. And you better pray he still wants you after this." Lisa's breath hitched. Because she knew the truth. Men like Mark don't like being played. And she had just lost the one thing she was banking on, a future with him. Her perfect escape had just turned into a dead end. Lisa stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her face pale, her breathing uneven. She was unraveling. Good. For months she had been the one in control, carefully pulling the strings, planning every step of her escape. But now she had no idea what was coming next. And for the first time, I saw it, fear. Not fear of me. Fear of the consequences. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "So what happens now, Lisa?" She swallowed hard. I don't know." I let out a short laugh. "That's funny. Because you sure as hell had a plan yesterday." Lisa rubbed her temples, like she was trying to think. "Trying to fix this. Trying to salvage something. Mark will understand," she said finally. But even she didn't sound convinced. I smirked. "You think so?" Her lips parted, but no words came. Because deep down, she knew better. Mark wasn't going to take this lightly. Men like him don't like being fooled. And I had just handed him the truth on a silver platter. I could see it in Lisa's eyes, the realization sinking in. She had played the wrong game. And now, she was losing. Her breath quickened. "I need to talk to him." I shrugged. "Be my guest." Lisa hesitated. She was debating it, probably wondering what Mark would say, how much damage I had done. I watched her reach for her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed. It rang. Once. Twice. No answer. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. Her chest rose and fell faster now. The panic was settling in. I smirked. "Guess he doesn't feel like talking." Lisa looked up at me, wide-eyed, as if I had the answers. But I wasn't the one who needed to explain myself. She was. And suddenly it hit her. She had nowhere to go. No Mark. No plan. No perfect escape. Just me. The husband she had tried to erase. And now? She was trapped. Lisa stood there, gripping her phone like it could somehow fix everything. But no matter how many times she stared at the screen, it didn't change the fact that Mark wasn't picking up. I watched as she tried again. And again. Voicemail. Every time. The color drained from her face. I could see the thoughts racing behind her eyes. Maybe he's just busy. Maybe he needs time. Maybe Henry is lying. But I wasn't lying. Mark knew. And Mark was gone. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, letting her sit in the silence. Letting her feel it. She had planned for every detail, every move, every excuse. But she had never planned for this. Finally, after what felt like minutes, she lowered the phone to her side. Her shoulders slumped. "He'll come around," she muttered, more to herself than to me. I smirked. "Sure." Lisa swallowed. She was still trying to convince herself that Mark wouldn't just walk away. But deep down, I think she already knew the truth. She had left me for a man she thought was her future. And now? She had no one. I pushed off the counter and walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice thin. I didn't look back. "To do what you were too much of a coward to do." Lisa's breath hitched. I stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. Let her sit in that empty house. Let her feel what it was like to be the one left behind. For the first time in months, I was the one walking away. And I wasn't looking back. I stepped outside, letting the door shut behind me with a quiet finality. For the first time since this whole thing started, I was the one leaving. Not Lisa. Not Mark. Me. The morning air was crisp, but my mind was sharper. The weight on my chest, the one that had been pressing down since I found that damn plane ticket, was gone. Because now, Lisa had nothing. No Mark. No future she could run to. No clean break. Just the wreckage she had created. And I wasn't going to be the one to clean it up. I got in my car and gripped the wheel. I could have driven anywhere, maybe to a hotel, maybe out of town, maybe just down the street to clear my head. But there was one last thing I had to do first. I had to finish what I started. I dialed Mark's number. 1 ring. 2. Then, he answered. "Hello?" His voice was flat, cautious. I exhaled slowly. "Guess you've had time to think." Silence. Then, a bitter chuckle. "Yeah. I have." I leaned back against the seat. "So? What's it gonna be? You still waiting for Lisa, or are you done?" Mark let out a heavy breath. "She never told me about the way she was leaving you. Never told me she was planning to disappear like that." A pause. "That's not the kind of woman I want in my life." I smirked. There it was. "She's still trying to call you," I said. "You gonna answer?" "No." His voice was firm. "I think we're both better off without her." I nodded to myself. Smart choice. There was nothing left to say. I hung up. Then, finally, I pulled away from the house. Lisa might still be standing in that living room, staring at her phone, waiting for Mark to save her. But he wasn't coming. And neither was I. Because Lisa had spent months planning how to leave me behind. Now, I was the one leaving her. I didn't know where I was driving, but I knew I wasn't going back. Not to Lisa. Not to the life she had already abandoned in her mind. The further I got from that house, the lighter I felt. The rage, the heartbreak, the betrayal, it was still there. But it wasn't suffocating me anymore. It wasn't mine to carry. Lisa had made her choices. And now, she had to live with them. I pulled into a gas station, parked in the farthest spot, and just sat there for a while. No calls. No texts. Not from Lisa. Not from Mark. She wasn't chasing after me. I don't know why I expected her to. Maybe some stupid part of me wanted her to run out of that house, to beg me to stay, to realize what she had lost. But Lisa wasn't that kind of person. She wasn't going to fight for me. Because she had never planned to. And maybe that was the real truth I had been avoiding all along. This wasn't just about Mark. Or the move. or the way she had lied to me for months. Lisa had been gone for a long time. I was just the last one to know. I took one last deep breath, then opened my phone and deleted her number. No goodbye. She didn't deserve one. And neither did I. Because this wasn't the kind of story that ended with closure. This was the kind of story that just ended. I sat in that parking lot for a long time, watching people come and go. A man pumped gas while his kids argued in the back seat. A woman in a business suit rushed inside, probably late for work. An old couple walked hand in hand, moving slow but steady. Life. Moving forward. And me? I was just sitting there, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing. No home. No job. No wife. Lisa had taken all of it away in one swift, merciless cut. But for the first time, I realized, maybe that wasn't a bad thing. She had left me with nothing. But nothing meant I had no more lies. No more waiting for a love that had already faded. No more pretending that we were ever going to be okay. No more Lisa. And that wasn't a loss. That was freedom. I turned on my car and pulled back onto the road. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I wasn't going back. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. There was nothing left to see. Lisa wasn't calling. Mark wasn't answering. The life I thought I had, the future I had planned, was already gone. And I was okay with that. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, I was free. Lisa had built a life of lies, and for too long, I had been trapped inside it. I had spent months believing we were moving forward together, when really, she had been planning to leave me in the dust. But now I was the one moving forward. Not toward her. Not toward revenge. Just forward. The city limits faded behind me. The road stretched ahead, endless and open. I didn't know where I was going. But wherever it was, it would be mine. And that was enough.